pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. For today's meeting, for now, we are going to, forego the Board of Managers meeting, and we're going to go into a reorganization meeting. Before I get into that, I'd like to speak on behalf of the Prison Board. Judge Vito Girallo is no longer the chairman of the Prison Board, and I'd like to personally thank him, along with the other members of the Prison Board, for all his hard work that he's done in organizing a lot of the programs over at the prison. I think that benefits not only the inmates, but the taxpayers. So I applaud him for all his hard work that he's done throughout his tenure as chairman. Having said that, we're going to have to vote on a new chairman of the Prison Board. So having said that, if there's any motions, I'd like it to be put out on the floor now.
I'll make the motion that Judge Nibbins be chairman of the Prison Board.
Second.
Okay, any other nominations for chairman? All in favor of Judge Gibbons being our new chairman? Show of hands, say aye. Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Judge.
Congratulations, Judge.
Thank you. I think.
That would be cool minutes.
First day on the job and the first minute on the job, and I'm put in charge. So my thanks will be tentative at this point, but still heartfelt. I would like to second Sheriff McAndrew's comments about Judge Girallo. As you know, he resigned from the board, and the statute requires an appointment someone from the court, and President Judge Barres appointed me. So I hope that I can do justice to the position, and I look forward to working with everybody here. So without any further ado, I'll entertain a motion. Everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The meetings are approved. The minutes are approved. Next, we'll have the current payables. They're identified on the agenda as 17-137. They are attached electronically and produced in paper format here. I trust everybody's had an opportunity to review them. And I'll entertain a motion to approve all current payables for the Community Correction Center, the Juvenile Detention Center, and the prison.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Current payables are approved. Next item on the agenda is the Controller's Report.
Thank you, Judge. The Controller's Office has reviewed the prison inmate and canteen account reconciliations, which were prepared by the Prison Business Office for the month of July 2017, and found no discrepancies between the reconciliations and the bank statements. The balance in the inmate account was $348,017.24 as of July 31st, 2017. The balance in the canteen checking account was $432,781.76 as of July 31st of 2017. And in addition, as of July 31st, 2017, the canteen account owned 2 certificates of deposit, one valued at $15,000 and the other at $131,811.59, which total $146,811.59. And that concludes my report.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Controller's Report.
So moved.
Second.
Second. On the question.
Just on the question, I want to also, if you don't mind, recognize Judge Giraldo for very well done serving as chairman of the prison board, and we're gonna miss him. And Judge, we want to wish you the very best of luck as you take over the chairmanship.
Thank you. Thank you. Any others on the question? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The controller's report is approved. Now we'll have the report on the Community Corrections Center. Mr. Jeffers?
Good afternoon, Board. Welcome, Judge.
Thank you.
The Community Corrections Reports for July of 2017. Item 1, the program totals for the month. Male work release had 47 participants. Female work release had 4 participants. Adult house arrest had 126 participants, and juvenile house arrest had 15 participants. Item 2, our program's revenues for the month of July totaled $68,559.22. Item 3, our program's expenses for the month of July totaled $96,039.88. Our program's completions for the month: work release had 11, house arrest had 27. Our program violations and returns: work release had 4, house arrest had 3. Our program's outstanding warrants: work release still has 7, house arrest has 2. And item 7, our budget report for the year: overtime is at 63%, expenses are at 58%, and revenue is at 63%. Just another item for the judge's knowledge. The board is well aware, prior to you coming on, Judge, last month the board okayed a expenditure for an expansion of female work release. It'll show in the August report that we went in on August 2nd, I believe it was. That concludes the report for this month.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve Director Jeffers' report.
Second.
On the question. Any questions for Director Jeffers? Okay. How do we vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Judge.
Jeffers. Your report is approved. Okay, and now we'll get the Warden's report from Warden Betty.
Good afternoon, Board, and welcome aboard, Judge.
Thank you.
The average daily in-house population for the jail for the month of July was 946 inmates. We have attached charts regarding our overtime report, out-of-county report, and community service program participation report to the report that's in front of you. Staffing update: currently our corrections officers' numbers break down to 170 uniformed staff on shift. 1 officer's out on workers' comp. 1 is on continuous FMLA. 25 are on intermittent FMLA. That adds up to 14% of the officers. 4 other and 4 vacancies, total of 180 officers. Budget as of July 31st, revenues at 47% and expenses are at 54%. Juvenile inmates, currently we are housing 2 juveniles, both are females. Inmates at or past their minimum, the total is 31. We have 5 with no home plan, 10 that are presently participating in the community service program, work release program, or house arrest program. 1 parole has been denied due to an unacceptable home plan. 9 home plans have been submitted and they're awaiting parole, and 6 have been remanded for the balance of their sentence. Extraordinary occurrence reports: there were 6 extraordinary occurrences since the last prison board meeting. On 8/4, a county inmate was placed into the restraint chair after grabbing a nurse's arm through the wicket and taking medication from that nurse and refusing to give it back. On 8/7, a county inmate was placed into the restraint chair after refusing staff orders. The incident escalated to a point where staff were concerned about his erratic behavior, and he was put on a 15-minute behavioral watch. On 8/12, a county inmate was placed into the restraint chair after making continual claims of wanting to harm himself. On 8/12, this same county inmate was moved from the restraint chair to 4-point humane restraints on the orders of the prison psychiatrist. On 8/13, a county inmate was placed into the restraint chair after becoming involved in a physical altercation with staff. The decision was made for staff safety purposes. On 8/18, a new county inmate was placed into the restraint chair after being uncooperative and making threats to staff upon commitment. PREA, there were 5 allegations of PREA violations since our last meeting. 2 were deemed unsubstantiated, 1 was founded, and 2 were deemed unfounded. Commissary RFP update. We're continuing to negotiate parts of the proposals and will be requesting a best and final offer soon. However, the present contract expires in mid-September of this year, and the county will not be in a position to execute a new contract with a provider by that time. Therefore, I'm seeking the Prison Board's recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to enter into a contract extension through the rest of the year. That is until 11:59 p.m. on New Year's Eve. If the board does grant that recommendation to the commissioners, I'll then approach the commissioners requesting that extension. And just so you're aware, Your Honor, our present commissary provider is Oasis in that contract. I believe the date is 9/14 or 9/15 that the present contract expires.
It's just an extension of the term, no change in that.
No changes in anything whatsoever, just an extension. I'm hoping to have it done before December, but you know, just to be safe, to give them a 3-month extension, and this way we can just move forward from there. And finally, food service RFP and medical services updates. We continue to develop the RFPs for both the food services and medical services, and both will be advertised in the near future. That's the end of my report.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the warden's report.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, the commissary account, how long has the current vendor been in place?
Is it 5 years, Dave? I'm pretty sure it's been 3 or 5 years. I know they've been running. I was out of the loop for a couple of years. I wasn't with the county, but I believe it's 3 now that I'm thinking about
Annual
it.
account? It's an annual contract, or is it?
I believe it was a 3-year contract.
3-year, okay. Okay. Any other questions? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The warden's report is approved. Thank you, Warden.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it done here, or is it done?
Well, the commissioners, I think, have to approve it, but we will
Yeah.
make
If the
a,
prison board okays it, then.
we will make a recommendation
Okay.
or not to the commissioners, so. Would anybody like to make a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners that the commissary account be extended an additional 3 months?
I'll second it.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The recommendation will be made to the Board of Commissioners to extend the commissary account. Okay. So now we come to the opportunity for the public to address the board. Is anybody here from the public interested in addressing the board?
My name is Joan Hodewanitz. I live at 220 Linden Street here in Scranton. For the last several months, I and a number of other people, some of us associated with the Scranton Public Library, have been trying to reestablish a library in the county prison. There have been one there in the past, but it had fallen into disuse. We're trying to do this in such a way there'll be no cost to the taxpayer. We've got a source of books and other items. We're looking for volunteers that could go down there. We're looking at a program which would not only provide books and other items for education and entertainment of the inmates, but would be a morale booster. For example, one of the things we want to reestablish is bringing in children's books so that the inmates could tape a children's book and have it sent to their families to be read either as a bedtime story or maybe a birthday gift. That'd be good for the morale of the families and the morale of the inmates. I asked a question with the warden earlier before the meeting began. Is there an active GED program at the prison? Apparently there is not, and it hasn't been one for a few years. If you were to reestablish a GED program, which I think would be a very good thing to do, your library could then support the materials that the inmates would need. both to improve their literacy and specific subject matters. So this program has to crawl before it starts to run, but we're going to be working hard on this. So I would ask that you relook the whole issue of, do you need a GED program? If you don't have one, why don't you? And how can you get one up and running again? I think that would be a win-win for the prison, for the inmates, and for the general community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Janet Zawicki. My husband is at the Lackawanna County Prison. And on February 22nd of this year, I had my visits taken away. There was a verbal altercation with the CO and the lieutenant. I wrote a couple of letters to the warden, and I'd like to read those so you can understand what happened. He asked me to write the letter explaining what happened that day, so I will read it to you. Dear Warden Betty, on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2016, I made my usual hour-and-a-half drive to see my husband, Patrick Zawicki, a drive that I had been doing for the last 11 months. I arrived to the prison around 2 p.m., an hour before sign-up, so that I could get an early visit and make my long ride home. Around 3 p.m., CO Sedlick signed me up, and I had a seat waiting an additional 30 minutes till they call to see our loved ones. CO Sedlick has been there every Wednesday with the exception of the few weeks he was out on medical. He had been rude to me and others many times before this. Every week he has asked me how to spell my name, and every week I say it's on my license. I have witnessed him threaten other people with their visits for no reason. He is often rude, if not always, to me and others. When he was out on medical, the atmosphere was pleasant and the process was run smoother, and we were thankful he was not there. So getting back to the particular Wednesday, after going through the metal detector twice due to my boots, I was last or close to it to get into my visit. When I did get into the room, there was 2 phones left. Both did not work, and my husband and I were not able to hear each other. I went back to the door that I entered in, and it was locked. There was a sign that said to exit, push the button. I pushed the button. When I pushed the button, there was a voice that asked me what was wrong. I told him there was no working phones, and he told me to stand by. I waited a few minutes with no response. Not sure how long stand by is. I pushed the button again. No response. I pushed the button again and again. I was banging on the door with nothing. I have to ask the question, what if it was an emergency? There are elderly women that come and visit that wear oxygen. How do they know that something isn't happening? That someone might need medical attention. I'm aware that they have cameras, but I can't imagine they'd look at the camera and would ignore me for 15 minutes. You may think 15 minutes isn't a long time, but I encourage you to go to the door in your office and knock on it for 15 minutes. You will find that 15 minutes feels like a long time when you are trapped and can't get out. When CO Sedlick did open the door, I said in a sarcastic tone, "Why would you have a sign that says push the button to exit if you're not going to let me out?" He told me, "I don't like your attitude, you can leave." I in return said, "I drive an hour and a half and you're not going to let me see my husband?" His response was to that, "That's right, and if you keep it up, you won't ever see him again." So before I go any further, I just want to point out that at this point, he has taken my visit away and has threatened me with no further visits over 2 questions. 2 questions that I might add were not threatening in any way. I will tell you that in this particular Wednesday happens to fall on my wedding anniversary, and I was excited that I would get to see my husband on such a special day to both of us, a day that probably heightened my emotions. So when CO Sedlick told me this, of course, I was angry and stormed to the desk where Lieutenant Kugler was. I asked him if he was in charge, and he said that what can I help you with? I tried to explain to him that I was locked in the visiting room for 15 minutes, and when I asked CO Sedlick about the sign, he kicked me out of my visit. While I'm trying to tell Lieutenant Kugler, CO Sedlick was saying how busy he was. Lieutenant Kugler told me that the visits were a privilege, and he stood by CO Sedlick's decision. Meanwhile, CO Sedlick asked me what my husband's name, and I said Zawicki, and he said, "Good, I'll put it in the computer to make sure you won't see him again." It is at this point I lost it. I swore and I yelled, and I am beside myself that I would be dismissed. I am ashamed that I would allow CO Sedlick to take me out of my own character, but the fact of the matter is I did, and for that I'm sorry. Lieutenant Kugler did call the police to have me removed, but I waited outside for the police on the sidewalk. I'm not proud that I let someone affect me in the way that C.O. Sedlick did that day. I do believe that you should punish me. In taking my visits away, I understand, but to never to be able to see my husband seems to be a very harsh punishment. A punishment that was given to me before I even lost it. A punishment that was given with 2 questions. By the time you get this letter, I have already lost 3 visits with my husband. I'm not sure how many visits you feel is acceptable for me to lose, but I even beg you to reinstate my visits. I do want to say while all this was going on, my husband had no idea. My husband, being confused as to why we weren't seeing each other, asked C.O. Copa to call the front desk. C.O. Copa relayed a message from C.O. Sedlick to my husband, Patrick Zawicki, that they called the cops on her and not to worry because if he wanted to talk to her, he'd be able to talk to her through the toilets. This is the part that clearly shows what kind of person C.O. Sedlick is and how he feels, that he is above everyone to antagonize my husband. I am being punished, yet he can say and do anything he chooses without any regard for others. I hope this is not the case. I have been coming for the last 11 months, missing only 1 visit due to a funeral. I have been respectful, even when disrespected. I haven't caused any problems, and I can promise that I will never again allow someone to bring me out of character. I work hard, I have my own home, and never been in trouble with the law. This is a new world to me where I am treated like a criminal. I can tell you this, and I'm sure you heard it before, but you can't help who you fall in love with. Where on a daily basis you see bad, we see good. I'm sure your jobs aren't easy, but there are hardships in every job. But when we start to lose our human dignity, compassion for others, then I think it's time to move on. There was no compassion for me that day and the struggle I go through every week to be able to see my husband. There was arrogance. I'm the boss and I don't care about you. Please don't just look at my actions that day. Please also look at what caused those actions. Please allow me to visit with my husband, Patrick Zawicki. And I assure you nothing like this will happen again. Thank you for the time for reading this. So I called the office after I sent this letter multiple times, and I finally got a hold of Kristen, his secretary, who told me that Warden Betty forwarded this letter to CEO Sedlick and Lieutenant Kugler. And I wrote another letter because there's another incident. This is the second letter. On March 6, 2017, I sent a certified letter to you, which is the letter I just read. This was a letter that Kristen told me you requested to get my side of the story of the events of February 22nd. I called and left a message every day for a response to my letter that was requested. On Friday, March 24th, I called your office at 10:34 a.m. where Kristen answered the phone. She told me that you had sent my letter over to Lieutenant Kugler and C.O. Sedlick, and they were to be put in charge of whether I could get my visits back with my husband. Kristen told me she had received an email from Lieutenant Kugler saying that if I made a verbal apology to him and C.O. Sedlick, that I would be able to get my visits back starting April 12th, 2017. I was relieved and happy that I would get a chance to see my husband again. Unsure of when they wanted me to apologize, I asked Kristen whether Lieutenant Kugler wanted me to come up ahead of time, being April 12th was a couple weeks away, or if it would be okay to apologize when I came to get my first visit. She was unsure and told me she would get back to me after talking with Lieutenant Kugler. The following Monday, March 27th, Kristen called me to let me know that she heard back from Lieutenant Kugler via email, and he said that I could make up my apology when I came down on April 12th when I got my first visit back with my husband. So on April 12th, I made my hour-and-a-half drive to apologize to Lieutenant Kugler and C.O. Sedlick and to see my husband. I went to the window 3 times and asked for Lieutenant Kugler before I was told that he probably would not be in due to target practice training. I waited in line for the visit, and when it was my turn, I handed my ID to C.O. Sedlick and asked him if I could speak to him over by the doorway. I met him at the doorway, and he told me that I told him that I would like to apologize for my behavior, and before I could say anything more, he told me an apology is not good enough. I will let you see your husband today, but you will not be able to see him again until you call the warden's office and tell them you exaggerated the letter that you had wrote to them. At this point, you could only imagine I was a little dumbfounded, being that my understanding was as long as I apologized, that I would get my visits back. I explained to him that Lieutenant Kugler had already given me permission for my visits to be returned as long as I apologized. He told me Lieutenant Kugler put him in charge until I called the warden's office, that I would not get my visits back. Very upset, of course, I told him I would call your office. I went out to my car where I called your office and left a short message of what just happened. I went back in and was able to see my husband for the first time in 9 weeks. Then made my hour-and-a-half drive home. I called your office the next day, April 13th, then the next day, the 14th, then the following Monday, the 17th, with no answers and no calls back. So on Monday evening, I called and talked with Lieutenant Kugler, who told me he backs up CO Sedlick's decision that by me writing that letter and saying the things I said about him, that it would go into his file, and when his evaluation came up, it would affect him. Again, being a little dumbfounded, I explained to him that through Kristen and the emails sent back and forth to him and her, you agreed to let me have my visits back with a verbal apology. He claims that he never agreed to give my visits back. He told me he would send you an email requesting a meeting with Sedlick and myself. So the next day, April 18th, I called your office and left a message, nothing back. On April 19th, a week after my first call, Kristen answered the phone at 9:30 a.m. I repeated everything that she told me and asked her again if it was her understanding that I was to get my visits back on April 12th with a verbal apology. She told me that was her understanding. She told me she got an email from Lieutenant Kugler saying that I requested a meeting with the warden and Sedlick and myself. I told her that I did not request that, but Lieutenant Kugler was requesting it. That what I wanted was just to give my apology and get my visits back, and can't understand why we're back to no visits. I told her that I would not say I lied on a letter I wrote to you, because I didn't and shouldn't be made to in order to get my visits back with my husband. She told me she was going to try to catch Lieutenant Kugler at the end of the day, that sometimes they run into each other during the shift change. I called the next day on Monday, on April 20th, to see if she had spoken with him. No answer, so I left a message. The next time I was able to speak with Kristen was April 25th. She thought that Lieutenant Kugler had already called me to let me know that I would not be getting my visits back. I went over and over the situation with her, not understanding how this was happening. How could I get my visits back, then taken away? I asked her who I could talk to above Lieutenant Kugler, and she told me there was no one, because you had to put the decision in their hands. So on May 2nd, 2017, I called Lieutenant Kugler again to see what I could do to get my visits back besides say I lied, when I didn't. He told me that he's never seen CO Sedlick act rude to anyone, even the lady that works at the front desk, that she has never seen it. He then told me again that my writing the letter, that it would affect his evaluation. I told him I was asked to write the letter, and in the letter was my truth. The letter was written to you, Warden Betty. I asked Lieutenant Kugler how he could give me a date for my first visit, let me drive an hour and a half one way, which he was well aware of, by the way, because I said that in my first letter, and then have CO Sedlick say I have to admit to exaggerating my first letter in order to see my husband again. So I asked Lieutenant Kugler if what he's telling me, that I have to plagiarize myself in order to get my visits back. His response was that he was not asking me to do that I wasn't getting my visits back because of the events of February 22nd. Then I tried to go over the conversation between Kristen and I about how we set up the date and how I asked whether I needed to come ahead of time to apologize. He did not want to hear anything more from me and told me he was too busy to keep going over and over this with me and had to go, and then hung up. So the question is, Warden Betty, who's lying? Is it Kristen lying, who gave me a date, took my question and got back with me with Lieutenant Kugler's response, or is it Lieutenant Kugler who's lying? I really don't think that Kristen would go through the trouble to tell me about the correspondence between her and Lieutenant Kugler and give me a date for my first visit, and when I could apologize if it wasn't relayed to her. I really do believe that Lieutenant Kugler is covering up for CO Sedlick, who asked me to lie. In my second conversation with Lieutenant Kugler, he said that CO Sedlick told him I never apologized to him. Don't you think that if that was the case, he wouldn't have let me see my husband on April 12th? I feel that because he did let me see him on the 12th, that the events from February 22nd were resolved, that the reason which CO Sedlick stated would not allow me to have further visits because of the letter written again tells me I have to call your office to say I exaggerated the letter. So Warden Betty, what I am asking of you is to please allow me to have my visits back. I have done everything that was asked of me except say I lie when I didn't. I wrote the letter that was asked of me. I've apologized. I don't believe that Lieutenant Kugler is the final say. That's why there's a chain of command. To be honest with you, I don't trust him. I believe that I need to have a neutral party involved that will hear what I have to say, that will take the time to ask Kristen what was said to her and relayed to her. Someone that will look at the cameras on April 12th to see that I pulled C.O. Sedlick aside to apologize that he let me head my visit. Please, Warden Betty, be the neutral party. You see Kristen every day, take a moment and ask her. I love my husband and miss him every day, and I would do about anything to see him, but I will not lie. That saying, you're only as good as your word, well, I live by that, and I'm not about to change that for anyone. I again plead with you to allow me to have my visits. Thank you for taking the time to read this letter. He sent this letter over to C.O. Sedlick and Lieutenant Kugler again. I still don't have my visits. I wrote Judge Giraldo, and he told me that he can't get involved in policy. But I don't believe it's policy to tell someone they have to lie in order to get their visit back. I don't know who to go to next. I would just like my visit. It's been 6 months now. I've asked for a policy book. What is your policy? I can't get one. I've asked for their statements on what happened, they feel happened on the 22nd. I'm not entitled to those. The police were called, but they did not have to remove me. I needed someone to hear me that day because they weren't listening to me. So I waited on the sidewalk and I told the police what happened. I tried to get to a police report. There was no police report. I talked to the officer and he told me he could not write a police report when there was no incident. But he said that if I wanted to give his name, that anybody could call him and tell them that I did not act irrational for me to leave. I was already on the sidewalk waiting for them. So my question is, what do I have to do to get my visits back? I don't care that he told me to lie. I just want my visits back. I miss my husband. It's been 6 months. Who do I talk to next?
And thank you. Thank you for your time. I think the fact that you've spoken here in public, the warden is here and the warden has heard, the board has heard, as to the individual correctional officers, those seem to be matters of personnel which can't be discussed, in an open session that has.
But I mean, I've asked Warden Betty to give me 10 minutes of his time, and I have not gotten that.
Okay, well, he's
I've
here.
called the commissioner's office. I
He's
just want to
here.
see my husband.
I'm going to ask him, Warden, can you give Mrs. Zawicki some time after the meeting today so that she can talk with you about it? Okay.
Not a problem.
And hopefully that can get the matter.
I mean, I don't know what the policy is. If you get kicked out, how long your visits get taken away from.
Well, I can't tell you that I do either, but I do know that, that the policy at the jail, the setting of policy like that, in terms of visits and things like that, that's committed to the discretion of the administration at the jail, the warden. We don't get into micromanaging things of that nature.
I just think
However,
they stepped a whole new level, though, when he asked me to lie.
And again, you're talking about the conduct of an individual CO, which can't be discussed in open session. However, you've put it on the record, you've put it out there, the warden has heard it, he's going to talk to you
All right.
at the conclusion of the meeting. And so I think you did the right thing by coming here today and voicing your concerns.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Warden, would you be able to inform the board as to the result of how things go regarding this situation? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody else from the public like to address the board?
Hello, I am Dr. Stephanie Bressler, and I live in Scranton, and I am representing Progressive Women of NEPA, as well as NEPA Prison Advocates. And I would just like to, excuse me, support Joan's request about GED. I did see in the prison self-study that reactivating those GED classes was very, very strongly recommended. And I don't have the study with me, but I think there was a recommendation that they immediately be reinstated. And GED is very, very important for people who are trying to rehabilitate themselves. At the last meeting, there was a request made for funding to establish another apartment for women's work release. And my question today is that funding a loan from the canteen fund? Will it be paid back? Do women who work in work release, who live in work release apartments pay rent? And if so, is that money used to reimburse the canteen fund? Shall I just continue with my questions?
Well,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. In the warden's report today, there are several occurrences of addressing erratic behavior by placing inmates in the restraint chair. Who makes that decision? Does the warden or his representative have to consent to that placement? I understand from reading the prison self-study that there is a disciplinary process, and that's actually attached to the study. But what are the criteria for placing someone in the restricted housing unit, otherwise known as the hole? Does the warden or his representative have to consent to this punishment? And are the needs of the inmate in the RHU assessed on a daily basis? The statistics of the self-study show that 53% of female inmates, more than half of the female inmates, have a mental health history. The self-study recommends that a behavioral unit be established, as well as a standing committee to determine how to best utilize medical and psychiatric resources. What is the status of this recommendation, which seems like a very important recommendation as we think about the awarding of, hopefully, the awarding of a medical contract? While the commissary RFP, request for proposal, was published in February, we hear today that the commissary bidding process has not been completed. So the RFP published in February, today in August, we learned that that process has not been completed, resulting in the warden's request to extend the current contract to the end of the year. Which brings up a really important question. Knowing that the medical contract will expire in December, we have been asking for 5 months that the contract be bid, and have been told by this board that yes, a request for proposal for that contract will be published. We've been hearing for the last 2 months that that RFP is being developed. What is the status of that RFP? And what is the planned date of publication? What are the plans for medical services when the current contract expires in December? Shall I wait for answers, or would you like me to sit down?
Well, do you have any other?
No.
Is that the end of your remarks and your questions?
Questions, yes.
I think the warden indicated today that the RFP is in process.
But we've been hearing that. And the contract will expire in December. And we're hearing today that a commissary RFP that was published in February has not resulted in that process being completed and that commissary contract having to be extended from its expiration in September through the end of the year. So the big question is, what's going to happen with that medical contract? If that RFP is published today, will there be enough time to select from among those who bid?
Well, I'm hopeful that there will be enough time. We'll have to see how many proposals come in and make a determination based upon that. We can request proposals, we can't go out and manufacture them.
Right, but the RFP has not been published.
I understand your point,
Yeah.
but they are working on it. They are getting to that point, and it should be resolved by that time. If it's not, we'll have to deal with it accordingly. It is
Right.
what it is. It's something that they are working on, and they're working on it.
Okay,
Ward Betty will get us to answer some of your questions. Yeah, she may be able to answer better.
Okay.
You built the protocol, they'll work.
Yes.
We'll answer some questions at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Gordon, can I have some responses, please?
Yeah, I started taking notes at the meetings anymore so that I can address things and hopefully not miss anything. So if I do miss anything, please let me know. Start with Dr. Bressler's. You had mentioned, and I believe Joan had also mentioned GED. It is something that's on our radar. It is something that we're working towards. We had a lot going on this year with all these different contracts running out, and with the phone service contract and us, remember we had a brief discussion about e-tablets. We're waiting to see what these electronic tablets are capable of doing to see how much it's going to cost to download GED materials onto these electronic tablets for the inmate population. That's the holdup with GED. We're very much in favor of it. I was a big proponent of GED being offered at the prison. What happened to it is about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, the programming was cut. It was being offered by EOTC, and it cost money for the instructors to be coming in and for the equipment to be provided, not equipment, but the books and materials. It was cut for budgetary reasons about 5.5 years ago. I am trying to get that back. I can't answer the questions about the women's work release funding. I don't believe it's a loan. Director Jeffers can correct me on that. I don't believe it's a loan. It's money coming out of the canteen fund, and it's going for inmate use. And the inmate use is for our female offenders to get out of jail and into work release so that they can start moving forward with their lives. I would not expect that the canteen fund would get reimbursed by them. But any other questions on the women's work release, I would refer you to Director Jeffers. Let me see. Several occurrences of the use of the ERC and who decides. There is a system in place. The sergeant will make that call. Obviously, anyone higher than a sergeant can make that call. It is something that every time there's a use of the emergency response chair, we do take a look at it to ensure that the use of that is justifiable. It is not punishment. I'd really like to stress that to everybody. The emergency response restraint chair is for the safety of the individual and for the staff. We use it when an individual is threatening self-harm or threatening to harm others or acting out in that manner. It's you heard me also mention 4-point humane restraints. It's much better than 4-point humane restraints because at least you're sitting down. You can't harm yourself when you're in that chair because your arms are immobilized and your legs. We can put a helmet on you because we have individuals who will rock that chair over to a wall and start banging their head off the wall. We deal with some really crazy things. Recently we had a guy who got up from his 4-point restraints and immediately started chewing on his arm. That's the kind of thing we have to deal with.
Talk about the withdrawals. 'Cause that's
Withdrawals, one thing people don't realize, and I know,
There's a lot of things that go on. The chairs-
I was going to say, and alcohol withdrawal is horrible. All withdrawals are horrible. Alcohol withdrawal is horrible. There are visual, auditory hallucinations that are involved with alcohol withdrawal. It's the worst withdrawal that I've seen is alcohol withdrawal. Of course, all the withdrawals are bad, and people react differently. Some people that are prone to seizures may have seizures. A lot of people, because of how they feel, they'll just act out in a crazy manner. And we have to be able to manage that in a safe way to keep ourselves safe and to keep the individual safe.
Does the sergeant or higher officer have the discretion to institute that?
Yes, 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 yeah.
And is there some sort of review?
There is a review. As soon as the person is securely in that chair, the nurse will come over and make sure that the straps are not too tight, that he or she can get fingers under there. We don't want anything too tight. They are, depending on the situation, frequently visited by the medical staff there. And the reason I say depending on the situation, some situations call for an hourly, a half hour, the nurse coming by and checking vitals on the individual. Other situations, it's just a matter of checking on the person every hour, hour and a half. We also have a built-in rule. If, and this rarely happens, somebody is in that chair for 8 hours, I got to get a call at that point. And I'll make a decision at that point. What are we doing with this individual? I will also check off with our psychiatrist as well if somebody's in that chair for 8 hours and hasn't calmed down enough to come out of that. So a lot of variables involved. Sergeants and above make that decision, and those decisions are reviewed.
What about the library?
The library, we're fully supportive of that. As Joan had mentioned before, we do have, I know that Deputy Warden Langen met with some folks from the library yesterday. That's moving along. It is crawling, but it's progressing, and that's always a good thing. Yeah. So we'll be getting there very soon. The last thing that Dr. Bressler mentioned I just wanted to hit on was she asked about the status from a self-study recommendation regarding a separate, it sounded like a separate block for individuals with mental health. Frankly, impossible in our facility. Right now, today, speaking of the women, we have 149 women in our jail. We don't have a block to designate just for women when you're talking about 53% or so of the women have mental health issues. It's probably a pretty accurate statement from my personal experience. I'm not trying to be funny. We call that general population. When you're talking more than half of your population has a mental health, that's your normal population. That's what we're dealing with. We have to deal with the individual who is outside of that abnormal normal. We do deal with an abnormal normal. So for the rest of society, it's here with prison populations. Sometimes things are shifted over here. That's our normal. And we're looking to deal with the person that's way out on the right or way out on the left. It's just not feasible. We have small blocks. We have 16-bed blocks. We're using them. We do use them. We have statuses, administrative segregation, special handling, things like that. And a lot of these people, a lot of times, will end up getting classified on that as that at their own request or at the request of staff because of their inability to get along with the rest of the, whether it be male or female population. I don't know if I missed anything. I'm just kind of rattling real quick just to hit all the points.
So perhaps
The restricted housing unit?
yeah, the RH, I think the question is there,
There's definitely criteria for being placed there, pre-hearing segregation, and that is that you're a risk to yourself or another, or not to yourself, but usually it calls for an act of violence. If two people get in a fight, they're going down pre-hearing down into the restrictive housing unit. Most of the time, the individual is staying on his housing unit or her housing unit until they'll have a misconduct hearing.
there's an administrative procedure in place.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's usually within 5 days of the incident occurring that the person's having their hearing and they're finding out right then and there what's happening with them. Are they getting no time? Sometimes it's a restriction on commissary. Sometimes they have to clean the toilets. There could be a bunch of things. But frequently, there is time that you have to serve in the restrictive housing unit, a time period. And we do have 3 levels of misconduct, 1, 2, and 3. And the more severe the misconduct, the more time you could potentially do in restrictive housing.
So as part of the disciplinary process, there's generally a fixed time that they're in there, because she asked if there was a daily assessment, whether they still belong there.
There is a fixed time. There is a weekly. We have a classification committee where we not only review everybody who puts in for an appeal, but we also take a look at individuals that aren't in restrictive housing, but are in housing situations like administrative segregation and special handling. Matter of fact, that meeting is in 40 minutes. So it's every Wednesday at 1:30, and our classification committee hears all that.
And just to be clear, the individuals that are placed in the restraint chairs, all the incidents are reviewed, correct?
They are all reviewed. They are all on camera, right? I was going to say, I just want to make sure with Deputy Warden Langen, and I'm not misspeaking. So if you're the sergeant, you're pulling out the camera and you're filming everything. So everything is very reviewable. And it's never used as punishment. It is not a tool of punishment. It is to protect the safety of the individual and the staff.
Thank you, Warden.
Can you speak to the questions regarding work
Yes, Your Honor.
release?
To go back to when I was talking before, but even further back, when I recommend to this board and Judge Durrell himself, when they were here before, that we move men's work release back downtown, I also came up with a plan to move women's work release out of the prison. As you well aware, and the board is aware, that women's work release was always housed in the prison, and it was not, associated with the men's work release, which it should have been from the very start. But that being said, we came up with a plan. We ended up having 2 apartments that have 2 bedrooms apiece in each apartment, and we were able to get 4 girls out as a pilot program. When I approached the board for this pilot program, we originally paid for it out of the canteen fund. Subsequently, after that, we reached out to Senator Blake's office, and he helped us allocate a grant for the next 2 years for those 2 apartments. Sometime in June of this year, President Judge Brace contacted me that he was looking to get another apartment, and can we do it? Can we talk to the board? Which I did. I talked to Judge Durallo, Chief Wallace, and the rest of the board. At that point in time, my budget had been sealed for 2017. There was not extra money in the budget to get that. But we are progressive in trying to get women out of the prison as much as we can. So I approached the board again and asked for, I think it was the $11,000 a month ago that we asked for that allocation at the canteen fund, and it was voted on and approved. So we started the program, or started the 3rd apartment as it was, on August 1st. It'll run through May 31st of next year, and we will have to see if that apartment is still feasible, if we still want to use it, if it's being used itself, or and if it is, will we come up with funding for it again, or go back to the canteen fund? That being said, we do not pay the canteen fund back. It's not a loan. It's a one-time fee that this board has voted on and agreed upon, and I think it's a very progressive move to get the women as much as we can out onto the streets and moving in a forward fashion. Do they work? Yes. Primarily they do. Do they pay rent to the county? Yes. The fees are set by the prison board. Depending upon what they're in for, it can be anywhere between $10 and $15. Is everybody always paid up in full? They are not. And we're well aware on both sides, male and female, that some individuals have difficulties of getting work, whether it's a physical disability, a mental disability, or something else going on where they are unable to attain work. And we try to get them to work as much as we can help them with. And we are pretty successful in getting them work. That being said, what we really want to do with these individual women in these particular apartments, the reason they're there is they don't have a home plan. They don't have a place to live. So what we're really trying to do with them is get them out of the prison, into these apartments, get them working, get them a feasible home plan for parole and for the judges, and move them into society so that the next group of females can come back in there. So it's very helpful to everyone involved, but our primary job is to get them moving into society until they get their own home plan. So, collecting a lot of money out of them is not my #1 priority at this moment in time. It's to find them, let them save their money, and move them forward. I don't know if that should answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. there any other business? Can you address the board? Yes.
I just wanted to make one brief statement.
What do you want to say?
My name is Beth Ann Zero, I'm from Dunmore, and I just wanted to comment, because there is such a large population that is a different type of normal, it just kind of speaks to the importance of the medical contract that is coming up, and how important it is on the basis that is a part of that treatment.
Thank you.
Preliminary medical RFP has been. Judge, a preliminary medical RFP has been being worked on by a committee of people selected by the county and the prison board. We anticipate it'll be ready to be released within 2 weeks. We have solicited proposals from other counties to find out how they do it. The warden has gathered them, and we're putting the final touches on it. We're hoping to release it by September 8th, and they give individuals 30 days to respond back to us. Hopefully, we'll be able to do it within the confines of this year and be able to award it. There was some confusion on it initially because there was some thoughts on members of the present prison board to renew the current contract, and then we had a further discussion on it, and we decided to issue an RFP. So we got a little bit of a later start on it. Again, we anticipate it will be released by September 8th, and they will have approximately a month to respond to it, and then the committee will meet and review them and report back to the board. So I hope that's helpful. And that was confirmed with both the warden and our director of purchasing, Kevin Mitchell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other business from any other members? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Yeah,
Thank
do
you.
the board manager.
That's
Good afternoon. Mine's going to be quick. I'm going to hold this up. Currently, we have 8 juveniles at the center. July admissions was 8. Year-to-date admissions for male, 82. Female, 3. July male days of service, 142. July female, there was 6. Year-to-date, 717, and 59 for female. Year-to-date costs for males, there was another $7,500 for the juvenile that was housed down in Northampton. But one of my officers was the victim of the crime, so we shipped him out. And female cost is $14,942 for the year. Overtime is $4,387. That's down $3,000 from last year at this time. Hours were 148. The breakdown is on the back page, and staffing, there's been no issues in quite a while with that. It's the same. And that concludes my report.
Any questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the juvenile center report. Second. On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. It's approved. Anybody from the public want to address on the Board of Managers? No show of hands. Any members have any other business for the Board of Managers? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.